In a world that never stops talking, silence has become misunderstood. People assume that silence is surrender, that if you're not defending yourself, you must be guilty, that if you don't clap back, you must be weak, that if you don't explain your side, your truth must not matter. But the opposite is true. In an age where everyone is shouting to be seen, silence is no longer passivity. It's strategy. It's emotional discipline. It's control. Because the more you explain, the weaker you appear. The more you react, the more power you give away. And the harder you try to prove yourself, the more obvious it becomes that someone got under your skin. Let's be honest, most people don't want the truth. They want entertainment. They want a spectacle. They want to see you break, to see you justify, to see you spiral. And the moment you react, you become a player in their game. But when you choose silence, everything changes. Because silence isn't the absence of words. It's the presence of control. It's easy to speak. It's easy to vent, to lash out, to explain. But it takes a whole different kind of strength to hold your tongue when every fiber of your being wants to scream. That's Stoic power. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It doesn't crumble under pressure. It holds. It watches. It waits. Let's start with one of the most emotionally violent triggers: being lied about. Few things sting more than being misunderstood, misrepresented, or outright lied about. The natural instinct is to fight back, to correct the narrative, to show receipts. You want to defend your name. You want to prove them wrong. You want to clear the fog with clarity. But here's the brutal truth. The more you try to explain yourself, the more suspicious you look. The more you chase clarity, the more chaos they create. Because people who lie about you aren't after truth. They're after attention. They want you off balance. They want your energy. They want your reaction, because your reaction validates them. It shows them they got to you. So what happens when you give them nothing? That's where the game ends. That's where their power dies. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." No argument, no drama, just alignment. Because the truth doesn't require defense. It doesn't beg to be heard. It doesn't panic under attack. Truth, like gravity, always returns to where it belongs. And lies? They spread quickly, but they decay just as fast. They burn bright for a moment, and then collapse under their own weight. They rely on constant energy, constant fuel. And the moment you go still, the fire dies. Let me give you an example. There was a man, let's call him James. At work, someone accused him of manipulating numbers in a report. It wasn't true, but that didn't matter. Whispers started. Colleagues became distant. His reputation took a hit. James's first instinct? To defend himself. To call meetings, write emails, correct the story. But instead, he chose something far more powerful. He chose silence. He stayed steady, kept doing his job with precision, said nothing, proved nothing. Just action, consistency, and calm. And over time, the fog lifted. The truth emerged when the accuser, hungry for more chaos, made the mistake of trying to manipulate someone else, and got caught. James, he never raised his voice, never defended himself, and in the end, he came out not only clean but respected, because his silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was strategy. It was self-respect. So, how do you respond when someone lies about you? First, trust the long game. Falsehoods may sprint, but truth has endurance. Let time do the heavy lifting. Second, anchor yourself in your values. When you know who you are, the lies can't touch you. Your character is your witness. Third, let karma speak for you. People who lie often live in cycles. Eventually, they trap themselves in their own web. At the end of the day, silence is not surrender. It's self-respect. It's the refusal to play a game where every word becomes a weapon used against you. You're not hiding. You're rising. Now let's talk about betrayal. The second situation, where silence becomes your sword and shield. Betrayal doesn't just hurt. It reshapes you. It shifts your world, your trust, your identity. And what makes betrayal so brutal is that it comes from inside the walls, from those you let in, those you believed in. Friends, family, lovers, people you shared your soul with. When betrayal hits, it collapses the chest inward. It's not just pain. It's disorientation. You want to confront. You want to ask why? You want closure. But here's what people don't want to hear. You won't get closure from someone who broke you, because people who betray you have already justified it. They've rehearsed their reasons. Or worse, they simply don't care. And when you seek answers from someone who's emotionally bankrupt, all you get is more debt, more confusion, more pain. Here's what they're really after. Your energy. They want your reaction, your emotion, your pain, because that confirms their impact. That confirms they mattered. So when you give them nothing, when you go silent, that's when the real blow lands. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is friction. It's fire. And fire reveals the truth of things. It shows you who was real and who was just convenient. Let me tell you another story. A woman, we'll call her Sarah, had a best friend of over a decade. They shared everything. Dreams, secrets, late-night breakdowns. But one day, Sarah found out this friend had been speaking behind her back, exposing private conversations, and undermining her work out of jealousy. Sarah's initial reaction? Fury. She wanted to confront, to let it all out. But she didn't. Instead, she went silent. No drama, no text, no explosion, just absence. And that absence? It was deafening. The friend waited for the backlash. She was ready for the argument, the blame, the breakdown. But none came. Just silence. And that silence haunted her. Because silence has weight. It forces people to face themselves. It reflects their actions back at them, without you having to lift a single finger. So when betrayal finds you, and it will, remember this. First, accept who they really are. Don't hold on to a fantasy. The person you loved doesn't exist anymore. Second, don't explain yourself. You don't need to make someone understand what they chose to ignore. Third, walk away without a word, because silence creates reflection. And reflection is a mirror that betrayers fear most. In the end, you are not the one who lost. They are. They lost someone rare, someone real, someone loyal. Let them feel the loss, not through punishment, but through absence. Because silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. We've talked about lies and betrayal, two deeply personal violations. But sometimes the attacks are more public, sharper, quicker, aimed to humiliate, not destroy. I'm talking about insults. They come in many forms: sarcasm, passive-aggressive jabs, backhanded compliments, veiled mockery, direct verbal shots. Insults are cheap, and that's exactly why weak people use them. Because when they don't have substance, they substitute with sting. When they can't earn respect, they provoke for attention. But here's what most people miss. Insults are not about truth. They're about control. The person insulting you doesn't want clarity. They want a reaction. They want to see you flinch, argue, defend yourself. Because that response proves their power. And the moment you engage, you lose. You may think you're winning with a clever comeback or a louder voice, but you're not. You're playing their game. And in their game, the only rule is this: the one who reacts first loses. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That's the essence of Stoicism. You don't descend into the mud. You don't give them the satisfaction. You let their words fall into the silence and echo back empty. Let me paint the picture. There was a man, David. He'd just received a long overdue promotion, a decade of quiet work, no shortcuts, no politics, just discipline. At a company event, while others were congratulating him, one coworker, bitter, insecure, smirked and said loud enough for the room, "Well, I guess they're giving out promotions to just anyone now." The room went still. Eyes turned. Tension hung in the air. Everyone waited for David to snap back, to shut the man down. But David? He looked at him calmly, held his gaze for a second, and said nothing. No words, no smile, no smirk, just stillness. And in that moment, David didn't just win the room. He won the war. Because silence, when delivered with strength, strips power. And nothing frustrates an insulter more than being ignored. That's the paradox of insults. They only work if you hand them your dignity. So how do you deal with them? First, recognize the game. If they're trying to trigger you, it's not personal. It's strategic. They want to destabilize you. Stay grounded. Second, let your stillness speak. Your calm face, your steady posture, your unbothered presence, it all communicates. You don't control me. Third, hold your frame. Confidence doesn't shout. Self-respect doesn't explain. When you refuse to descend, they rise to nothing. Because here's the truth. Not all battles deserve your sword. Some are better won by staying seated. And then there's the manipulative victim, arguably more dangerous than the direct attacker. Why? Because they don't shout. They cry. They don't confront. They twist. They don't insult. They perform. They rewrite the story. Remove their responsibility. Flip the script. And suddenly, you're the villain. This isn't conflict. This is theater. And the moment you try to explain yourself, you walk onto their stage, and you've already lost. You see, these people don't want resolution. They want attention. They don't want truth. They want control. They cry to gather sympathy, not to seek understanding. They bend facts, manipulate perception, and always seem to have a new enemy, a new injustice, a new sob story. Epictetus once said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." That applies here, because these manipulative victims don't complain to fix, they complain to gain leverage. Let me give you an example. A woman, Rachel, had a co-worker who constantly played the victim. Every time she was held accountable, she cried, deflected, shifted blame, claimed she was being attacked. Rachel at first responded with logic, proof, facts. She stayed calm, detailed her points, and explained the truth. And every time it backfired. Why? Because the coworker wasn't interested in facts. She was acting. And when logic tries to debate emotion in public, emotion always wins the audience. So Rachel made a decision. No more defense. No more energy. No more playing a role in someone else's narrative. The next time it happened, Rachel didn't respond. She didn't correct. She didn't clarify. She just held her stillness. And over time, people began to notice. The pattern emerged. The victim mask slipped, because manipulation requires participation. And when you don't engage, their performance collapses under its own weight. So, how do you deal with manipulative victims? First, don't defend yourself. They're not listening, they're acting. And the more you talk, the more they twist. Second, stay emotionally detached. Observe, don't absorb. Let them drown in the storm they created. Third, trust repetition. People may believe them once or twice, but patterns always reveal the truth. Time is your ally, because in the end, you don't owe clarity to someone who thrives on confusion. You don't owe peace to someone who feeds off chaos. Let them talk. Let them spin. Let them act. You don't need to fight them. You just need to step back and watch the curtain fall. Because silence, it's not passive. It's active. It's decisive. And it's loud in the way that only true strength can be. Not all wounds come from direct attacks. Some cut deeper because they come wrapped in subtlety. No arguments, no betrayals, no explosions, just a slow, quiet erosion of your worth. This is the silence of neglect. You give, you show up, you care, you make the effort. You ask how they're doing. Remember the small details. Stay consistent. And in return, you get distance, delay, disinterest, silence. Not the silence of wisdom, but the silence of being ignored. And here's the hard truth. The more you try to prove your worth, the less they see it. Because people don't value what they believe they'll never lose. Constant presence becomes background noise, and eventually they stop hearing you at all. Not because you have nothing to say, but because they've stopped listening. But Stoicism teaches us something essential here. Seneca said, "Time discovers truth." And sometimes the truth people need to discover is your absence. Let me tell you about Jake. Jake was the one who checked in, the friend who remembered birthdays, the colleague who picked up the slack without complaint, the partner who made coffee every morning just the way she liked it. He gave without keeping score, but he began to notice something. No one asked how he was doing. No one checked in unless he did first. And when he stopped calling, the silence stretched into weeks. That's when he realized he wasn't being valued. He was being used. So Jake made a quiet decision. No confrontation. No "I deserve better" speech. He simply stopped. He let the silence speak. And here's what happened. The people who truly valued him noticed. They reached out. They made the effort. The rest, they disappeared. And that was his answer. Because silence doesn't just reveal who people are, it reveals who actually cares. So what do you do when your value is ignored? First, stop chasing. If they can't recognize your presence, let them feel your absence. Second, don't explain. Let the silence make them wonder. Let the space you leave behind do the talking. Third, observe who steps up, who reaches out, who notices. These are your people. The rest were just passengers in your life. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth with effort. You prove it with distance. Because true connections don't require reminders, they respond to absence with presence. But there's another kind of attack. One that's deliberate, repeated, and insidious. The kind that aims not to leave you but to provoke you. Some people don't want resolution. They want a reaction. They poke, they prod, they make passive-aggressive comments. They drop sarcastic bombs. Not because they're bold, but because it's the only way they feel powerful. And here's the dangerous part. The more you react, the more power they steal. This isn't about anger. It's about control. If they can trigger you, if they can move you emotionally, then they've become the puppeteer. And you, the marionette, pulled by their strings, dancing to their tempo, reacting on command. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that is the core of dealing with provocation. Emotional discipline. You don't rise to every jab. You don't flinch at every slight. You don't defend yourself every time someone calls your name with venom. You stay still. You stay sharp. You stay you. Let me tell you about Adam. Adam had a coworker who was a master at manipulation. He never insulted directly. Instead, it was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Sarcastic remarks in meetings. Subtle digs. Always vague enough to avoid HR, but sharp enough to sting. At first, Adam responded. He explained. He defended. He fought back with logic. And every time he walked away more exhausted. Until one day, Adam realized, this isn't about misunderstanding. This is about control. So the next time the coworker threw a jab, Adam didn't speak. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't even sigh. He just smiled faintly, held the silence, and kept going. And that silence, it disarmed the attacker. Because people who are used to playing with fire don't know what to do when the match doesn't light. Eventually the jab stopped, because provocation needs response to survive, and Adam refused to feed the fire. So how do you handle provocation? First, recognize the pattern. Repetition reveals motive. If they always stir drama, it's not random, it's strategic. Second, hold your frame. You control your breath, your tone, your presence. They don't. Third, let your calm be your power, because unshakable presence makes provocateurs feel invisible, and that's the one thing they can't handle. Not every battle is yours to fight. Some are designed solely to drain you, and silence is how you starve the chaos. But here's the final twist. In this chapter, what happens when they finally realize your worth? When the one who lied, betrayed, ignored, provoked, regrets? Regret is loud, but silence? Silence is louder. There comes a moment, sometimes weeks, sometimes years later, when they remember. When the noise dies down, when the chaos clears, and they look around and realize you're gone. The messages you sent, the time you gave, the loyalty you showed, the way you never asked for much but gave so much in return. It hits them, not as nostalgia, but as loss. And here's the key. Don't go back. Because if someone only starts valuing you after you leave, they never truly valued you when it mattered. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And part of mastering yourself is mastering your standards. You don't go back to what broke you. You don't lower your boundaries to soothe someone else's guilt. You don't break your silence just because they're finally listening. Let me tell you about Olivia. She was the steady one. In love, she gave deeply. She was patient, loyal, supportive. Her partner, over time, became complacent, took her presence for granted, assumed she'd always be there. Until one day, Olivia was gone. No argument, no breakdown, just a calm, complete departure. At first, he brushed it off. Then came the silence, the unanswered messages, the empty space. And suddenly, he realized what he had lost. He begged, apologized, promised change. But Olivia didn't respond, because she didn't just leave. She healed, in silence. And that silence, it wasn't punishment. It was her freedom. So what do you do when regret comes knocking? First, don't make it easy to come back. Let the silence remain. Let it be the mirror they must face alone. Second, resist the urge to explain. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just your absence. Third, stand firm. Your silence is your final answer. It says, you had access. You wasted it. Now live with that. Because true strength is not in the explosion. It's in the exit. And your silence, if held with purpose, can echo louder than anything you could ever say. By now, you've seen the patterns. When someone lies, betrays, provokes, neglects, or regrets, the loudest voice in the room doesn't always win. In fact, it often loses. Because real power, it doesn't scream. It doesn't explain. It doesn't rush to defend itself. It waits. It observes. It lets the truth do the talking. In a world addicted to noise, silence is radical. It's a rebellion against emotional chaos. It's what happens when you've matured past needing to win every battle, respond to every jab, prove every point. It's the moment you stop trying to be understood, and instead, you understand yourself. Let's be clear about something. Silence is not avoidance. It's not passivity. It's not weakness. It's control. It's standing in the fire and not flinching. It's letting someone else spin their web while you quietly step outside of it. It's choosing peace over pride, long-term clarity over short-term validation. And above all, it's letting time and truth finish the sentence you refused to write. Because while you may fall silent, the universe doesn't. There's a force in this world that doesn't need applause. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need your intervention. It's called karma. You see, karma doesn't always look like punishment. It often looks like patterns repeating, like truth resurfacing, like manipulators losing their audience, like liars caught in the knots they tied themselves, like those who took you for granted, suddenly noticing the hole your absence left behind. And you? You don't need to orchestrate revenge. You don't need to say a word. You just let the silence echo. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture. In each of the 7 scenarios we've explored, silence becomes something more than just non-reaction. 1. When you're lied about. Silence protects your dignity and lets truth reveal itself in time. 2. When you're betrayed. Silence becomes your exit, clean, controlled, and complete. 3. When you're insulted. Silence denies them the reaction they're fishing for and leaves them powerless. 4. When someone plays the victim. Silence removes you from their drama and exposes the act. 5. When you're ignored. Silence becomes a mirror that forces others to confront their own indifference. 6. When you're provoked. Silence is the shield that turns manipulation into impotence. 7. And when they regret losing you, silence is your final boundary. One that says, I respect myself too much to return to what I outgrew. That's the beauty of Stoic silence. It's not reactive, it's intentional. It's not empty, it's full of restraint. It's not retreat, it's elevation. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts are steady, your soul is steady. And silence, when used with wisdom, is the ultimate expression of internal steadiness. But let's not pretend it's easy. Choosing silence requires discipline, emotional mastery, a rejection of ego. It's easier to lash out than to hold your tongue. Easier to fire back than to walk away. Easier to argue than to sit still in your strength. But Stoicism never claimed the path was easy, only that it was right. So how do you cultivate this silence? How do you wear it like armor? Here are 3 closing principles. 1. Silence as presence. Silence doesn't mean you disappear. It means you show up differently. You don't disappear from the battlefield. You rise above it. You stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided not to listen. You stop performing innocence for those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stand. You breathe. You exist in truth. Let others fill the silence with assumptions. The people meant for you will see through the noise. 2. Silence as boundary. Your silence isn't an empty space. It's a border that says, access denied. You don't beg people to treat you right. You don't chase explanations. You don't demand apologies. Your silence is the boundary that separates what you allow from what you no longer accept. It says, you don't get to injure me and still hear my voice. It's not coldness, it's closure. 3. Silence is legacy. Eventually, people will remember what you didn't say. They'll remember how you didn't beg for validation, how you didn't argue to be understood, how you didn't collapse when they pushed, how your silence, your discipline, your control, it all became a force of its own. Because silence isn't just a response, it's a legacy. Think about the most powerful people. You know, the ones you admire not just for what they say, but how they carry themselves. Their restraint, their calm, their precision. Now realize this, you can be that person. Not tomorrow, now. You don't need a massive following, a perfect past, or approval from anyone. You only need the courage to stop explaining yourself to people who aren't worth the words. The courage to let go, not to win an argument, but to win your peace. So the next time you're lied about, betrayed, insulted, provoked, neglected, or mourned, don't explain. Don't react. Don't justify. Just watch. Let the chaos tire itself out. Let karma do its quiet work. Let the truth surface, as it always does. Because silence, it's not an absence. It's a statement, a presence, a boundary, a legacy. And in a world addicted to noise, your silence, it will be the loudest thing they remember. If this message stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your worth, your dignity, your power, then hold it close. Don't let the noise of the world drown it out. And if someone in your life needs this message, don't force it on them. Just send it. And let your silence carry it forward. Because strength is quiet. Wisdom is still. And in the end, the strongest person in the room is never the one shouting. It's the one who knows when to say nothing at all.